After you open 3D Studio Max for the first time, you will land into a screen like this one. So I am going to close the Learning Movies window, and I'll uncheck the box at the lower left corner before closing it, because I don't want this window to show up every time I open 3D Studio Max. So hit close. Now you might get other windows that will ask you to continue or close or hit OK, but I'm going to follow along and close them down. And then you will have this main window of 3D Studio Max. Now every time you launch 3D Max, then you should not get those extra windows or extra tip windows on top of it. Anyhow, so looking at this for the first time, you are probably going to say, my goodness, what are all of these icons and menus, and I see a grid and some numbers at the bottom. This seems too complicated. Well, it is not. I'm sure you're going to have fun as we go through the term, and you will learn and explore most of these functionalities and tools that you see in front of you. So let's get started. Let me give you a quick overview of the interface, and I'm not going to go in great detail because we're going to learn about the interface as we go on through the term. So starting from the top, we have our main menus, and in 3D Max 2010 we have some shortcuts all the way up left corner. Now these menus were not on the shortcuts were not on 2009 and previous versions, so they are pretty handy if you want to create a scene, open a file, undo, redo, save a file, and so on. But just like any other software, we have our main menus at the top. Okay. Now there are some extra menus that are specific for 3D Studio Max, but we have edit tools, group, and views, and I'm sure you are familiar with those. So if you click on any of the menus at the top, some of the menus down the list will have submenus, and the way you know that there are submenus is by looking at the right side. You have that triangle pointing to the right. That means that you have submenus in there. Now there are submenus of submenus. So if I go to lights and then standard lights, I have submenus of submenus, just to keep that in mind. Okay, now let's move down. We have our toolbar right below that, and we have many tools in there that we can add or take out. And if you add a lot of tools and they don't fit on your window, you can always scroll the toolbar left to right. You can just place the mouse right below where you see that hand cursor, a hand pointer, and then you can move the tools left to right. Okay. Now if you want to learn about the names of each tool, you can roll over and you will get a display or a label right below that tool. It will tell you what tool you are about to click. And here's the select and link, here's the unlinked selection, and so on and so forth. Now, another thing I want you to keep in mind about the tools are some of the tools will have subtools, like this one. See, this one, if I hold it down, it has subtools. The reason I knew that this one has some more subtools behind it, it's because I'm looking at the lower right corner. I see that triangle or that dot pointing to the right. And here's another one. Okay, now the select and move tool does not have a subtool, so if I click and hold this, I'm not going to get any other options. So just keep that in mind. Okay, I'm not going to go over these. These are in 3D Max 2010, some handy tools, shortcuts to get around, and we'll use them as we go on. I'm going to move to the right side. We have our main panels in here. Sometimes I refer to them as main tabs. And there are create, modify, hierarchy, motion, display, and utilities. You can click on each tab to see the functionalities or the functions within that tab, and we'll use those a lot when we start modeling and animating. Okay, so let's go ahead and go down below. Now if you look at the tools all the way at lower right corner, these tools control our viewport, and we'll learn about the viewport in our next session, so I'm not covering them when we actually get to viewports. So let's move down here. These tools control our timeline, and here's the timeline. Okay, and just like any other controllers, like on a regular VCR, they work the same way. So I can hit play, and the playhead will start playing. And here's my playhead. Okay, now notice that there are some numbers. So there is a division in there, 60 over 100. That means that there are 100 tracks, or 100 frames, or 100 keyframes, whatever you want to call them, and I am on top of frame 60, or track 60. So you can go backward by 1 frame, or you can go forward 1 frame. You can do the same thing with these. Next frame, previous frame. And if you have worked with software that uses frames, such as After Effects or Flash or Final Cut Pro, then you are familiar how the frame world works. If not, don't worry about it. We're going to cover from basics on how to animate and how do we get around using frames. Now, most of the section in here is used for animation. So the key, the auto key set, and you'll see how we use that when we animate. If I move forward to the left, I have the X, Y, and Z coordinate, and they actually display the value wherever the object is on the viewport. So if I move my mouse now somewhere in the viewport, it tells me where I am moving in comparison to this grid. So here's the coordinates that you see within this grid, and you'll see how we use those as we go on through the term. So that's about it for the quick overview of the interface, and now let's get going and start talking about the viewports.